They called her just a janitor who couldn't handle anything more complex than mopping floors and emptying trash bins. What they didn't know was that Clara Volkov had once been Europe's most brilliant aerospace engineer, and she was about to prove that the person who saves your nation's most critical defense program might be the one you see every night pushing a cleaning cart through your hallways. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The security badge clipped to Clara Volkov's navy blue uniform read, "Maintenance staff, level 1 access only," a designation that restricted her to the most mundane areas of Titan Defense Industries, one of America's largest military contractors. At 42, with jet black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and steel gray eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing, Clara moved through the sprawling facility with the invisible efficiency of someone who had perfected the art of being overlooked. Her daily routine began at 6 p.m. sharp, when the engineers, project managers, and defense analysts who populated the gleaming corridors during daylight hours had long since departed for their suburban homes. Clara would retrieve her cleaning cart from the maintenance closet, methodically checking her supplies: industrial-grade floor cleaner, microfiber cloths, trash bags, and the specialized equipment required to maintain classified work environments. The ritual was soothing in its predictability, a stark contrast to the life she had once lived, where every day brought impossible deadlines and decisions that could affect the lives of millions. The Titan Defense Complex stretched across 200 acres of carefully manicured California landscape, its modernist architecture designed to project both innovation and security. The main research facility where Clara worked rose 7 stories above ground, with 3 additional levels buried beneath that housed the most sensitive projects. Her access was limited to the first 3 floors, areas deemed safe for someone whose background check had revealed nothing more interesting than a series of unremarkable service jobs and a quiet life in a modest apartment 20 minutes away. What those background checks couldn't reveal, was that Clara Volkov had once been Dr. Clara Volkova, the youngest lead engineer ever assigned to the European Space Agency's most classified military satellite program. Her work had revolutionized stealth technology, developed radar-absorbing materials that were decades ahead of anything previously imagined, and created guidance systems that could navigate through the most sophisticated enemy defenses. She had been Europe's answer to America's technological dominance, a brilliant mind capable of innovations that could shift the balance of global power. That life had ended 3 years ago in a conference room in Brussels, when Clara had discovered that her revolutionary stealth technology was being sold to hostile foreign governments by her own supervisor. Her attempt to expose the conspiracy had been met with character assassination, fabricated evidence of mental instability, and ultimately, a choice between prosecution for treason or complete disappearance from the scientific community. Clara had chosen invisibility, trading her laboratory for a cleaning cart, her doctoral credentials for a maintenance uniform, and her reputation as Europe's most promising aerospace engineer for the anonymous safety of night shift janitorial work. The irony of her current employment was not lost on Clara. Titan Defense was developing the next generation of American stealth bombers, aircraft that would incorporate technologies remarkably similar to those she had pioneered in Europe. Every night, as she emptied wastebaskets and cleaned whiteboards covered with equations she could solve in her sleep, Clara was surrounded by the kind of work that had once defined her existence. She could see the flaws in their approaches, the inefficiencies in their designs, and the vulnerabilities in their systems. But she remained silent, moving through their world like a ghost, invisible and unnoticed. The transformation from Dr. Volkova to Clara, the janitor, had required more than just changing her name and appearance. She had spent months learning to suppress the instinctive urge to correct mistakes she observed, to offer solutions to problems that seemed obvious to her trained eye. She had practiced moving with the deliberate slowness of someone performing manual labor, rather than the quick, precise movements of someone accustomed to operating sophisticated equipment. Most challenging of all, she had learned to endure the casual dismissal and occasional condescension that came with being viewed as intellectually inferior by people whose understanding of aerospace engineering barely exceeded that of an interested amateur. The sunny California morning that would change everything began like any other, with Clara arriving at her small apartment after completing her night shift. She had learned to sleep during the day, blackout curtains ensuring that her bedroom remained dark while the world outside continued its normal rhythm. Her apartment was deliberately sparse, furnished with items that suggested the modest means and simple tastes of a working-class immigrant. There were no books on advanced mathematics or aerospace engineering, no technical journals or research papers, no photographs that might hint at her previous life as one of Europe's most respected scientists, but hidden behind a false panel in fascia. Her bedroom closet, sealed in waterproof containers, were the artifacts of her true identity, copies of her published research, photographs from her time at the European Space Agency, and detailed notes on innovations that had never been fully implemented before her forced exile. These items were both her greatest treasure and her most dangerous liability, proof of capabilities that could either restore her former life or ensure her permanent disappearance if discovered by the wrong people. As Clara prepared for another night of invisible service at Titan Defense, she had no way of knowing that the sunny day outside would be the last peaceful one she would experience for a very long time. Hidden within the routine paperwork and casual conversations of the defense facility, a conspiracy was taking shape that would threaten not just the stealth bomber program she cleaned around each night, but the technological superiority that kept America safe in an increasingly dangerous world. And the only person positioned to recognize and stop that conspiracy was a janitor with a secret that could save a nation. The Titan Defense Industries facility hummed with the quiet efficiency of high-stakes government contracting as Clara began her evening shift. The building's lobby, with its soaring glass ceiling and walls lined with photographs of military aircraft, transformed into a different world after hours. During the day, it bustled with engineers carrying classified tablets, defense officials in expensive suits, and military liaisons whose crisp uniforms commanded immediate respect. But at night, it belonged to the invisible workforce, security, guards, maintenance crews, and janitors who kept the facility functioning while its stars were at home. Clara's supervisor, Janet Morrison, was a 15-year veteran of facilities management who ran the night cleaning crew with military precision, despite never having served a day in uniform. At 58, Janet took pride in maintaining the highest security clearances possible for custodial staff and ensuring that Titan's classified work environments met stringent Defense Department standards. She appreciated Clara's reliability, attention to detail, and complete lack of complaints about the demanding work schedule that rotated through different security zones each night. "Good evening, Clara," Janet said as she handed over the night's assignment sheet. "Building 7 tonight, floors 2 through 4. The bomber project team has been working late all week, so expect extra coffee cups and pizza boxes. And remember, anything left on whiteboards gets photographed and filed before cleaning. These engineers would lose their heads if we didn't keep track of their scattered thoughts." Building 7 housed the Nighthawk program, Titan's most classified project developing the B-47 Wraith, America's next-generation stealth bomber. The $3 billion program represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology designed to penetrate the most sophisticated enemy air defenses and deliver precision strikes anywhere in the world. Clara had been cleaning these floors for 8 months, long enough to understand the rhythms of the project teams and the mounting pressure they faced as critical deadlines approached. The assignment sheet indicated that Clara would be working the premium security zone, areas that required additional background screening and specialized training in handling classified materials. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her access badge, upgraded 6 months earlier after she had proven herself reliable and discreet, would allow her into conference rooms and laboratories where America's most advanced military secrets were developed. It was both an honor and an irony that the woman entrusted with cleaning around these sensitive projects possessed knowledge that could revolutionize their entire approach. As Clara gathered her supplies and headed toward Building 7, she reflected on the careful persona she had constructed over the past 3 years. Her English, spoken with a carefully maintained Eastern European accent, suggested someone educated, enough to communicate effectively, but not so sophisticated as to draw unwanted attention. Her work habits demonstrated competence without excellence, reliability without innovation. She had learned to ask appropriate questions about procedures and safety without revealing the depth of her technical understanding. The other night shift, workers treated Clara with the casual friendliness reserved for long-term colleagues who shared the bond of invisible labor. Maria Santos, who cleaned the administrative wings, would often share coffee and gossip about the day shift workers whose offices they maintained. Robert Chun, responsible for the computer labs, appreciated Clara's careful attention to the specialized cleaning requirements for sensitive electronic equipment. They saw her as a quiet, hard-working immigrant who kept to herself but could be counted on to help when needed. Building 7's elevator required Clara's upgraded security badge and a biometric scan that verified her identity before granting access to the classified floors. The technology was impressive by civilian standards, though Clara remembered working with far more sophisticated security systems during her time at the European Space Agency. As the elevator rose to the second floor, she mentally prepared herself for another night of working around the cutting-edge research that had once been her life's passion. The Nighthawk program's work areas reflected the intense pressure and creative chaos of advanced military engineering. Conference rooms featured walls covered with technical drawings that depicted aircraft configurations, radar cross-section analyses, and propulsion system specifications. Computer workstations displayed complex modeling software running simulations that tested thousands of design variables. Laboratory spaces housed prototype components and testing equipment that represented millions of dollars in research and development investment. Clara's cleaning routine in these spaces required meticulous attention to security protocols. Every document had to be secured according to classification levels before cleaning could begin. Whiteboards covered with equations and diagrams needed to be photographed for archive purposes, then carefully cleaned with specialized solutions that wouldn't damage the writing surfaces. Computer screens had to be verified as locked or logged out before any cleaning commenced. The work was demanding, but Clara had developed an efficient system that allowed her to complete her assignments while remaining virtually invisible to the few engineers who occasionally worked late. What made Clara's position particularly challenging was her involuntary understanding of everything she encountered. The technical drawings that other janitors would see as meaningless sketches were, to Clara's trained eye, detailed blueprints that revealed both brilliant innovations and concerning vulnerabilities. The equations covering whiteboards weren't random mathematical formulas, but complex calculations that she could analyze and often improve upon. The prototype components in the laboratories weren't mysterious devices but familiar technologies that she had helped pioneer in her previous life. The effort required to suppress her natural impulses to correct errors, suggest improvements, or ask probing questions was exhausting. Clara had trained herself to move through these spaces with the detached efficiency of someone who understood procedure but not substance. She would clean around technical discussions without revealing that she could follow every word, organize documents without indicating that she comprehended their significance, and maintain equipment without demonstrating her knowledge of its underlying principles. Her apartment served as a refuge from this constant psychological discipline. Located in a modest complex 20 minutes from the Titan facility, Clara's home reflected the carefully constructed identity of a working-class immigrant pursuing the American dream through honest labor. The furniture was functional but unremarkable, chosen from discount stores and furnished apartments. The kitchen contained basic appliances and simple foods that suggested practical rather than sophisticated tastes. The living room featured a television, a few paperback novels, and magazines that supported her cover identity as someone with limited education and modest aspirations. But Clara's bedroom told a different story to anyone who knew how to look. The blackout curtains weren't just for daytime sleeping, but for ensuring that her nighttime activities couldn't be observed from outside. The computer hidden in her closet was a high-end machine capable of running the same modeling software she encountered at Titan, though she used it sparingly to avoid creating digital footprints that might reveal her true capabilities. The technical journals she occasionally purchased were hidden among romance novels and celebrity magazines, camouflaged as the reading material of someone very different from Dr. Clara Volkova. As Clara prepared for another shift, she maintained the mental discipline that had kept her safe for 3 years. She would clean around America's most advanced military technology, invisible and unnoticed, protecting both her carefully constructed anonymity and the nation whose defense secrets she safeguarded simply by remaining silent. The sunny day outside. Her apartment window seemed to promise another routine evening of invisible service, with no indication that the most challenging test of her double life was about to begin. Clara's transformation from Dr. Clara Volkova to night shift janitor Clara Volkov had been a masterpiece of deliberate reinvention that required 18 months of meticulous planning and execution. Every aspect of her new identity had been carefully crafted to create a believable background that would satisfy security investigators while concealing her true capabilities and history. The process had been both psychologically devastating and absolutely necessary for her survival. The first challenge had been establishing a credible immigration story that would explain her presence in the United States without triggering deeper investigation into her European background. Clara had created a narrative of economic desperation, claiming to be from a small Romanian village devastated by factory closures and agricultural failures. Her supposed journey to America involved working passage on merchant ships, temporary employment in various European cities, and finally immigration through a family reunification program with distant relatives who had conveniently died shortly after her arrival. The documentation supporting this fabricated history was impeccable, created with the same attention to detail that Clara had once applied to designing satellite guidance systems. Birth certificates from a village that had been destroyed by flooding, employment records from companies that had gone bankrupt, and immigration papers that appeared authentic but contained subtle alterations that would redirect any serious investigation into bureaucratic dead ends. She had even learned conversational Romanian to support her cover story, though she was careful to speak it with the kind of imperfections that suggested limited education. Clara's physical transformation had been equally comprehensive. The elegant businesswoman who had once addressed conferences of international scientists had been replaced by someone who appeared worn down by manual labor and economic struggle. She had gained 20 pounds to create a more matronly appearance, changed her hair color from its natural auburn to black, and adopted posture and mannerisms that suggested someone unaccustomed to intellectual challenges. Most importantly, she had learned to moderate her natural intelligence, speaking in simpler phrases and avoiding the technical vocabulary that had once been second nature. The psychological aspects of her transformation were the most challenging to maintain. Clara had spent her entire adult life as someone whose opinions were sought and respected, whose innovations were celebrated, and whose intellectual contributions were valued by colleagues and governments alike. learning to exist as someone whose thoughts were considered irrelevant, whose presence was barely acknowledged, and whose capabilities were systematically underestimated, required a level of self-discipline that tested her mental resilience daily. Her apartment reflected this carefully constructed persona down to the smallest details. The books on her shelves were romance novels and celebrity biographies rather than scientific journals. Her computer was an inexpensive model suitable for basic internet browsing and simple word processing, with no indication of the sophisticated software she was capable of operating. Her clothing consisted of practical, inexpensive items purchased from discount retailers, creating an image of someone living paycheck to paycheck, without the resources for luxuries. Clara's social interactions were equally calculated to support her cover identity. She had developed friendships with other working-class immigrants in her apartment complex, people whose backgrounds and struggles provided natural conversation topics that reinforced her fabricated history. She shopped at ethnic grocery stores where her accent and cultural references would seem authentic, and attended a small Romanian Orthodox church where her occasional appearance wouldn't seem unusual but would be remembered if anyone inquired about her religious practices. The most crucial aspect of Clara's facade was her employment history at Titan Defense Industries. She had deliberately started in the lowest level maintenance position, demonstrating competence without excellence in order to gradually earn the security clearances that would allow access to more sensitive areas. Her performance evaluations consistently described her as reliable, thorough, and completely without ambition beyond maintaining steady employment. This carefully managed mediocrity had been essential to gaining the upgraded access badge that now allowed her to work in the Nighthawk program areas. Clara's relationship with her supervisor Janet Morrison was particularly important to maintaining her cover. Janet appreciated employees who followed procedures without question, completed assignments without complaint, and caused no administrative headaches. Clara had cultivated exactly this image, asking only appropriate questions about cleaning protocols and safety requirements, while never displaying curiosity about the technical work being performed in the areas she maintained. The financial aspects of Clara's new life required constant attention to maintain authenticity. Her salary as a night shift janitor was approximately 1/50th of what she had earned as a senior aerospace engineer, necessitating the kind of careful budgeting that was characteristic of working-class Americans struggling to make ends meet. She drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic that required regular repairs, lived in a modest apartment complex where the neighbors were primarily immigrants and young families, and maintained the appearance of someone for whom every expenditure required careful consideration. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of maintaining her facade was the intellectual isolation it required. Clara had once collaborated with brilliant colleagues on projects that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and technological capability. Her current existence denied her any outlet for the intellectual creativity that had defined her identity. Since childhood, she could observe innovations and improvements in the work around her, but was forbidden by her cover identity from contributing or even asking the kinds of questions that would demonstrate understanding. The psychological toll of this isolation was mitigated only by the knowledge that her sacrifice was serving a greater purpose. By remaining invisible and unnoticed, Clara was protecting both herself and the classified information she encountered nightly. Her presence at Titan Defense was essentially that of a deep cover intelligence asset, though she served no agency and reported to no handler. She was a lone guardian whose vigilance protected American defense secrets simply through her commitment to remaining hidden. Clara's daily routine had become a carefully choreographed performance designed to reinforce every aspect of her fabricated identity. She woke at noon, prepared simple meals that reflected her supposed economic circumstances, and spent her afternoons engaged in activities that would be expected of someone in her position, watching television, reading simple books, or occasionally visiting the local library where her computer use could be monitored without revealing any suspicious research interests. As evening approached, and Clara prepared for another night shift at Titan Defense, she performed the mental transition that transformed Dr. Clara Volkova back into Janitor Clara Volkov. The brilliant scientist would disappear behind a mask of deliberate ordinariness, hidden so completely that even the most sophisticated intelligence analysis would find only a hard-working immigrant woman whose greatest ambition was steady employment and modest security. This transformation had protected her for 3 years, but it was about to be tested by circumstances that would threaten everything she had built to survive. Dr. Marcus Brennan commanded the Nighthawk program with the arrogant confidence of someone who had never questioned his own intellectual superiority or moral authority. At 51, with silver hair meticulously styled and a physique maintained through expensive personal training, Brennan projected the image of a defense industry executive who had successfully navigated 3 decades of corporate politics through strategic alliances and carefully managed public relations. His corner office on the 7th floor of Building 7 featured floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Titan facility like a domain he had conquered through superior breeding and natural leadership. Brennan's background was impeccable. By conventional standards, combining an MIT doctorate in aerospace engineering with an MBA from Harvard Business School and a carefully cultivated network of connections throughout the defense establishment. He had joined Titan Defense 12 years earlier as a senior project manager and risen through the ranks by demonstrating an exceptional ability to deliver projects on time under budget while maintaining the cheating and into political relationships necessary for securing future contracts. The Nighthawk program represented the pinnacle of his career, a $3 billion testament to his leadership capabilities and strategic vision. The program director's management philosophy was built on the fundamental belief that successful military contracting required maintaining clear hierarchies and traditional organizational structures. Brennan viewed the modern defense industry's trend toward diverse hiring, collaborative decision-making, and inclusive management practices as dangerous departures from proven methods that had built America's military superiority. In his mind, aerospace engineering was a field that demanded rigorous intellectual standards and uncompromising technical excellence, qualities that were best maintained through traditional leadership approaches that emphasized credentials, experience, and demonstrated competence. Brennan's interaction with the support staff, who maintained his facility, was characterized by the kind of professional distance that reinforced appropriate organizational boundaries while demonstrating his understanding of proper leadership protocol. He would acknowledge custodial workers with brief nods during his occasional evening visits, make perfunctory inquiries about their work when conducting facility tours, and ensure that his administrative assistants sent appropriate holiday bonuses that reflected his appreciation for their contributions to mission success. But his attention was always focused on the real work of aerospace engineering, the complex technical challenges that required advanced degrees and sophisticated analytical capabilities. The program director's first encounter with Clara had occurred during a security inspection 6 months earlier, when he had been touring the Building 7 facility with representatives from the Defense Contract Management Agency. The inspection team had been evaluating Titan's compliance with classified material handling procedures, and Brennan had been demonstrating the company's commitment to maintaining the highest security standards throughout all aspects of the Nighthawk program. Clara had been cleaning the conference room where classified technical drawings were displayed on multiple whiteboards, working with the methodical efficiency that characterized her approach to handling sensitive materials. Brennan had observed her photographing the whiteboards before cleaning them, following security protocols that ensured no classified information would be inadvertently destroyed. Her movements were precise and professional, suggesting someone who understood the importance of the material she was handling, even if she couldn't comprehend their technical significance. Excellent protocol compliance, Brennan had told the inspection team, using Clara's work as an example of Titan's comprehensive approach to security management. Our custodial staff receives specialized training in classified material handling. They understand their role in protecting national security, even if they don't understand the technical details of what they're protecting. The comment had been delivered with the casual condescension that characterized Brennan's attitude toward support personnel, people who served important functions, but operated at intellectual levels far below those required for the real work of defense engineering. Clara had continued her cleaning without visible reaction to his remarks, maintaining the kind of focused attention to task that Brennan expected from competent but intellectually limited employees. Brennan's subsequent interactions with Clara had followed a similar pattern of professional acknowledgement combined with unconscious dismissal. He would occasionally encounter her during his evening visits to review project progress, and their brief exchanges reinforced his assumptions about her capabilities and background. Clara's carefully modulated responses to his questions about cleaning procedures and security compliance supported his view of her as a reliable but unremarkable employee whose contributions were measured in completed tasks rather than innovative thinking. The program director's management style emphasized the importance of maintaining appropriate professional boundaries between different organizational levels. He believed that clear hierarchies and well-defined roles were essential for maintaining the discipline and focus required for successful military contracting. In his experience, problems arose when support personnel attempted to exceed their assigned responsibilities, or when management failed to maintain appropriate authority relationships. Brennan's office reflected his personality and management philosophy. With the precision of a carefully designed stage set, the walls featured his degrees from prestigious universities, photographs with senior military officials and defense industry leaders, and awards recognizing his contributions to American aerospace capabilities. His desk dominated the room like a command center from which he directed one of the nation's most critical defense programs, surrounded by the technological artifacts and symbolic representations of his professional achievements. The program director's daily routine began at 06:00 with a review of overnight reports and intelligence briefings that kept him informed about global military developments and competitive threats to American aerospace superiority. He maintained what he considered executive presence through careful attention to professional appearance, authoritative communication, and unwavering confidence in his technical and managerial decisions. His staff meetings were characterized by detailed technical discussions and rigorous analysis of program milestones, with junior engineers often presenting complex data while he provided strategic guidance and final authority. Brennan's philosophy of leadership was fundamentally based on the conviction that aerospace engineering excellence depended on maintaining intellectual standards that excluded those without appropriate credentials and demonstrated capabilities. He viewed the defense industry's increasing reliance on diverse personnel and unconventional approaches as potentially dangerous compromises that could undermine the technical rigor necessary for national security. His approach to managing the Nighthawk program reflected these beliefs through emphasis on traditional hierarchies, proven methodologies, and careful attention to maintaining appropriate organizational boundaries. The custodial staff who worked in Brennan's facility occupied a clearly defined position in his mental framework of organizational structure and professional relationships. They were necessary support personnel who enabled the real work of aerospace engineering through their maintenance of appropriate work environments and security protocols. Their contributions were important, but fundamentally different from the intellectual work performed by degreed engineers and experienced managers who possessed the education and capabilities necessary for advancing American military technology. Clara's position As a night shift janitor with access to classified areas placed her in a category that Brennan considered appropriately managed through existing security protocols and administrative oversight. Her background screening had revealed nothing that suggested capabilities beyond those required for custodial work, and her performance evaluations consistently described someone who followed procedures without question while causing no administrative complications. From Brennan's perspective, she represented exactly the kind of reliable support personnel that enabled complex defense programs to function efficiently. What Dr. Marcus Brennan could not understand, could not even imagine, was that the quiet woman who cleaned around his office each night possessed aerospace engineering expertise that exceeded his own, technical knowledge that could revolutionize his entire program, and intellectual capabilities that had once been considered among the most valuable in European defense research. His assumptions about organizational hierarchies and intellectual capabilities were about to collide with a reality that would challenge everything he believed about leadership, competence, and the true sources of innovation in military technology. The first incident occurred on a Tuesday evening in late September, when Dr. Brennan encountered Clara cleaning the main conference room where the Nighthawk engineering team had spent the day struggling with persistent radar signature problems that threatened to delay the entire program by months. The whiteboards were covered with complex equations, attempting to model electromagnetic wave interactions with the bomber's proposed stealth coating materials, calculations that had consumed hours of debate without producing viable solutions. Brennan had returned to the facility at 9 p.m. to review the day's unsuccessful progress, his frustration evident in the sharp precision of his movements as he examined the mathematical work that represented thousands of hours of collective effort by his most experienced engineers. The radar cross-section measurements they were achieving fell significantly short of the performance specifications required by the Department of Defense, and competitive intelligence suggested that Chinese aerospace programs were rapidly closing the technological gap that had once guaranteed American air superiority. Clara was methodically photographing each whiteboard according to security protocols, when Brennan noticed her pause slightly while examining one particular equation sequence. The hesitation lasted perhaps 3 seconds, barely perceptible to most observers, but long enough for someone of Brennan's analytical training to register as unusual behavior from custodial staff who typically processed classified materials without apparent comprehension of their significance. "Is there a problem with the cleaning procedure?" Brennan asked, his tone carrying the kind of professional authority that expected immediate and differential responses from support personnel. His question was ostensibly about operational efficiency, but his underlying irritation with the day's technical failures colored his interaction with someone whose presence reminded him of the growing pressure to deliver breakthrough innovations on an impossible timeline. Clara's response was carefully calibrated to reinforce her cover identity while deflecting attention from her momentary lapse in maintaining ignorance about the technical content she was handling. "No, sir. Just making sure the photograph captures all the writing clearly. Some of these markings are quite complex, and I want to ensure nothing important is lost when I clean the board." The answer should have satisfied Brennan's inquiry and allowed Clara to continue her work without further interaction. Instead, something in her phrasing triggered his attention in ways that would prove increasingly problematic for both of them. The phrase "complex markings" suggested a level of analytical awareness that seemed inconsistent with her educational background, and her concern about preserving important information implied an understanding that the material had significance beyond simple record-keeping requirements. "Complex markings?" Brennan repeated, his voice carrying a note of condescension that Clara recognized immediately as the tone of someone who believed intellectual capabilities were distributed according to educational credentials and professional status. "These are advanced mathematical formulations for electromagnetic field analysis." I hardly think someone in your position would find them particularly complex or simple. To you, they should just be marks on a board." The comment was delivered with the casual dismissiveness that characterized Brennan's interactions with support personnel, but it represented the first direct challenge to Clara's carefully maintained facade of intellectual invisibility. Her response required balancing the need to deflect suspicion while avoiding the kind of submissive behavior that might encourage further condescension. "Of course, sir," Clara replied, maintaining the deferential tone expected from custodial staff, while suppressing the analytical observations that could have solved the electromagnetic signature problems his team had been struggling with all day. "I only meant that the writing has many symbols and numbers, so I want to photograph it carefully before cleaning." Brennan's satisfaction with her clarification was evident in his slight nod of approval, confirming his assumptions about the intellectual limitations of someone whose educational background consisted of basic job training rather than advanced technical education. From his perspective, the brief exchange had demonstrated the importance of maintaining appropriate professional boundaries while ensuring that support personnel understood their role in protecting classified materials they could never hope to comprehend. But the interaction had also established a pattern that would prove increasingly dangerous for Clara's carefully constructed anonymity. Brennan's attention had been drawn to her in ways that went beyond routine administrative oversight, and his assumptions about her intellectual capabilities created expectations that would become progressively more difficult to maintain without revealing the depth of knowledge she possessed. Over the following weeks, Brennan's awareness of Clara's presence in the classified work areas increased significantly. He began timing his evening visits to coincide with her cleaning schedule, ostensibly to ensure proper security protocols were being followed, but actually to satisfy a growing curiosity about the custodial worker who had momentarily seemed to display inappropriate interest in technical material. These encounters followed a predictable pattern that reflected Brennan's management philosophy and his assumptions about organizational hierarchy. He would arrive in areas where Clara was working, observe her procedures with the critical attention of someone evaluating performance standards, and occasionally make comments designed to reinforce appropriate professional boundaries while demonstrating his understanding of the technical work being performed. "Careful with those prototype components," he would say when Clara was cleaning laboratory areas where radar-absorbing materials were being tested. "Those represent millions of dollars in research investment, though I suppose the monetary value is less important than ensuring they don't get damaged by careless handling." The implications of such comments were clear to Clara, who understood that Brennan was establishing his intellectual authority while reminding her of her subordinate position in the organizational hierarchy. His tone suggested someone who believed that expensive equipment required careful handling by support personnel, who couldn't possibly understand its technical significance or strategic importance. Clara's responses to these interactions required constant attention to maintaining her cover identity, while avoiding the kind of defensive reactions that might indicate wounded pride or frustrated expertise. She had learned to accept condescension with the kind of patience that suggested someone accustomed to being underestimated, while carefully avoiding any demonstration of the technical knowledge that could solve the problems Brennan's team faced. Daily, "Yes, sir, I understand these materials are very important," she would reply, continuing her cleaning with the methodical efficiency that characterized her approach to all assigned tasks. "I follow all the procedures for handling sensitive equipment." But with each interaction, the psychological strain of maintaining her facade grew more challenging. Clara was watching brilliant engineers struggle with problems she could solve, observing expensive research programs pursue approaches she knew were fundamentally flawed, and enduring casual dismissal from someone whose understanding of stealth technology was limited compared to her own pioneering work in the field. The most difficult aspect of these encounters was Brennan's obvious satisfaction with what he perceived as successful management of support personnel who understood their proper role in the organizational structure. His confidence in his assumptions about Clara's capabilities created a dynamic that would become increasingly unsustainable as his attention continued to focus on someone whose true identity represented everything he claimed to value in aerospace engineering excellence. Dr. Brennan's increased attention to Clara's work performance evolved from casual oversight into systematic scrutiny that reflected his growing conviction that something about the night shift janitor required closer management and control. His concerns weren't based on any evidence of poor performance or security violations, but rather on subtle intuitions that Clara possessed awareness levels inconsistent with her supposed educational background and intellectual capabilities. The escalation began with Brennan's decision to implement what he called enhanced custodial oversight procedures, specifically targeting the cleaning staff who worked in the most sensitive areas of the Nighthawk program. These new protocols required detailed documentation of cleaning activities, mandatory reporting of any unusual observations, and regular performance evaluations that went far beyond the standard requirements for maintenance personnel. Clara found herself subjected to weekly meetings with Brennan's administrative staff, sessions ostensibly designed to ensure optimal security compliance, but actually functioning as opportunities for the program director to probe for inconsistencies in her background story or signs of inappropriate curiosity about classified materials. The meetings were conducted in small conference rooms, where Clara sat across from junior managers who asked questions clearly prepared by Brennan himself. "Tell us about your educational background in Romania," they would ask, reviewing files that contained the carefully constructed documentation of her fabricated history. "What kind of technical training did you receive before coming to America? Have you ever worked with complex machinery or electronic equipment?" The questions were designed to seem routine for security clearance maintenance, but Clara recognized them as attempts to identify gaps or contradictions in her cover story. Her responses required careful attention to maintaining consistency with her documented background while avoiding any revelation of the advanced technical education that had made her one of Europe's most respected aerospace engineers. "I completed basic school education in my village," Clara would reply, maintaining the slight uncertainty in her voice that suggested someone uncomfortable discussing limited educational achievements. "Before coming to America, I worked in cleaning and food service jobs. I have no training with technical equipment beyond what I learned here for this position." Brennan's satisfaction with these responses was evident in notes that appeared in Clara's personnel file, documentation that described her as appropriately limited in technical understanding and properly focused on assigned custodial responsibilities, without inappropriate curiosity about classified materials. But his continued attention suggested that her answers were providing reassurance about concerns that shouldn't have existed in the first place. The program director's scrutiny extended to Clara's physical access within the facility, with new restrictions that limited her cleaning assignments to areas where her presence could be more easily monitored and controlled. Zones that she had previously cleaned independently were now designated as requiring supervisory oversight, forcing Clara to work under direct observation by security personnel who reported her activities to Brennan's administrative staff. These restrictions were justified through reference to evolving security protocols and enhanced classified material protection procedures, but Clara understood them as responses to her inadvertent display of analytical awareness during their first significant interaction. Brennan was systematically reducing her independence while increasing surveillance of her activities, creating conditions that would make any future security breaches easier to detect and prevent. The most troubling aspect of this systematic undermining was its effect on Clara's relationship with other custodial staff and facility personnel who had previously treated her with professional respect and casual friendship. Brennan's obvious suspicion of Clara created an atmosphere where Association with her might be interpreted as evidence of poor judgment or inadequate security awareness. Janet Morrison, Clara's supervisor, began receiving regular inquiries from Brennan's office about Clara's performance, reliability, and any unusual behavior that might indicate security concerns. These inquiries were presented as routine management oversight, but their frequency and specificity created pressure for Janet to monitor Clara's activities more closely and report any deviations from expected behavior patterns. Dr. Brennan is very focused on maintaining the highest security standards, Janet explained to Clara during one of their weekly check-ins, her tone suggesting discomfort with the increased scrutiny while acknowledging the political realities of working for a high-visibility defense program. He wants to ensure that everyone working in classified areas understands the importance of following procedures exactly as written. Clara's response demonstrated the kind of professional acceptance that was expected from employees who understood their position in organizational hierarchies while harboring no inappropriate ambitions or resentments. "I understand completely," she replied. "Security is very important, and I want to do my job properly. Please let Dr. Brennan know that I appreciate his attention to these matters." But privately, Clara was beginning to understand that Brennan's systematic undermining of her position represented a significant threat to the anonymity that had protected her for 3 years. His continued focus on her activities suggested someone who had developed suspicions that could lead to the kind of detailed background investigation that might penetrate her carefully constructed cover identity. The psychological pressure of maintaining her facade under increased scrutiny was compounded by Clara's growing awareness of critical problems within the Nighthawk program that her expertise could solve. The electromagnetic signature issues that had triggered Brennan's first suspicious interaction with her continued to plague the development schedule, resulting in cost overruns and deadline delays that threatened the entire program's viability. Each night, Clara cleaned around whiteboards covered with calculations that approached solutions she had pioneered years earlier in Europe. She observed engineers pursuing research directions that she knew were fundamentally flawed, watched them struggle with materials science problems she had already solved, and endured the frustration of remaining silent while America's most critical defense program faltered for lack of innovations she possessed, but couldn't reveal. The irony was particularly acute given Brennan's public statements about the importance of maintaining American technological superiority through rigorous technical standards and intellectual excellence. The program director, who claimed to value innovative thinking and breakthrough capabilities, was systematically suppressing the presence of someone whose contributions could revolutionize his entire project. Brennan's campaign of systematic undermining reached a new level when he began making casual comments about Clara's work, performance during staff meetings and facility briefings attended by other engineers and managers. These remarks were carefully crafted to seem like routine personnel management, while actually functioning as character assassination designed to undermine any credibility she might have within the organization. "Our custodial staff performs adequate work within their capabilities," he would say during security briefings, his tone suggesting that adequate performance was the best that could be expected from people with limited education and training. "We must remember that support personnel serve important functions, but they lack the background necessary for understanding the technical work that defines our mission." The cumulative effect of these systematic efforts was to isolate Clara within the organization while creating an environment where any future revelation of her true capabilities would be interpreted as evidence of deception rather than hidden expertise. Brennan's undermining campaign was succeeding in marginalizing someone whose knowledge could save his program, while simultaneously creating the conditions that would make her eventual exposure both inevitable and catastrophic for everyone involved. The first significant crack in Clara's carefully maintained facade occurred during a crisis meeting on October 15th, when the Nighthawk program's lead electromagnetic systems Engineer suffered a heart attack while presenting critical radar signature. Data to a Pentagon Oversight Committee. Dr. Sarah Chun had been rushed to the hospital, leaving behind half-completed calculations that were essential for the next day's presentation to Kuho. Defense Secretary officials who would determine whether the troubled program would receive continued funding or face immediate termination. Clara was cleaning the conference room where the emergency had occurred when she overheard Dr. Brennan's desperate phone conversation with his deputy director. The mathematical work Dr. Chen had been developing represented 6 months of intensive research into electromagnetic wave propagation through the bomber's stealth coating materials, calculations that were so complex they required specialized software and advanced theoretical knowledge that existed within a very small community of aerospace specialists. "We need those equations completed by 0800 tomorrow morning," Brennan was saying, his voice carrying the kind of controlled panic that Clara recognized from her own experience with impossible deadlines and political pressure. "Without Chun's radar cross-section analysis, we have no viable response to the Pentagon's performance concerns. The entire program depends on proving that our stealth technology can meet specification requirements." The irony of the situation was not lost on Clara, who could see from across the room that Dr. Chun's incomplete calculations contained a fundamental error in the electromagnetic field modeling that would have produced results showing the stealth system as inadequate for military requirements. The mistake was subtle, involving assumptions about material properties that seemed reasonable but would fail under the specific radar frequencies used by advanced enemy detection systems. Clara's knowledge of these particular equations was profound, representing work she had pioneered during her time with the European Space Agency's classified satellite stealth program. She had solved similar problems years earlier, developing mathematical approaches that could accurately predict electromagnetic behavior across the full spectrum of radar frequencies, while accounting for variables that conventional modeling systems typically ignored or approximated incorrectly. As Clara continued cleaning around the conference table where Dr. Chin's notes were scattered, she found herself unconsciously analyzing the mathematical work with the automatic precision that had once made her legendary among European aerospace engineers. The solution pathway was clear to her trained eye, requiring modifications to 3 specific equation sets and the introduction of correction factors that would account for quantum-level electromagnetic interactions. The temptation to offer assistance was overwhelming, driven by both professional instincts and genuine concern for a program whose failure could compromise American military superiority. Clara understood better than anyone in the room that the Nighthawk program represented more than just another defense contract. It was a critical component of maintaining the technological edge that had kept America safe in an increasingly dangerous world. But offering help would require revealing knowledge that no night shift janitor could possibly possess. Expertise that would instantly destroy the carefully constructed identity that had protected her for 3 years. Clara forced herself to continue cleaning while listening to Brennan's increasingly desperate attempts to find someone capable of completing Dr. Chun's work within the impossible deadline imposed by Pentagon scheduling requirements. What about bringing in consultants from MIT or Stanford? His deputy director was suggesting over the speakerphone. Surely there's someone with the necessary electromagnetic field expertise who could work through the night to finish these calculations. Brennan's response revealed both his growing desperation and his fundamental misunderstanding of the specialized knowledge required for the work Dr. Chun had been performing. Those consultants would need weeks just to understand the context of Chun's research. "We need someone who already comprehends the specific electromagnetic properties of our stealth materials and can work within our existing mathematical framework." Clara's movements around the conference room brought her close enough to Dr. Chun's notes to observe the specific mathematical errors that were undermining the entire analysis. The mistakes were sophisticated enough that most aerospace engineers wouldn't recognize them as problems, but they would inevitably produce radar signature predictions that understated the bomber's detectability by enemy defense systems. Without conscious decision, Clara found herself pausing near the whiteboard, where the most critical equations were displayed. Her analytical mind automatically identified the correction sequences needed to fix the fundamental modeling errors, solutions that would not only complete Dr. Chun's work, but improve it beyond anything the original researcher could have achieved. Pause lasted perhaps 10 seconds, but it was long enough for Dr. Brennan to notice her apparent interest in mathematical work that should have been completely incomprehensible to someone with her educational background. His attention focused on Clara with the sharp intensity of someone who had been trained to identify anomalies and security irregularities. "Is there something about those equations that interests you?" Brennan asked, his voice carrying a dangerous combination of suspicion and condescension that Clara recognized as a direct challenge to her cover identity. "Perhaps you have insights into electromagnetic field theory that might help us solve our current crisis?" The question was obviously sarcastic, delivered with the tone of someone who expected to demonstrate the absurdity of imagining that custodial staff could contribute to advanced aerospace engineering problems. But Clara's response would determine whether her carefully maintained anonymity could survive this increasingly dangerous scrutiny. "No, sir," Clara replied, forcing herself to step away from the whiteboard while maintaining the deferential posture expected from support personnel. "I was just wondering if I should clean around these writings or wait until you're finished with your meeting. I don't want to disturb important work." Her answer should have satisfied Brennan's suspicions while reinforcing his assumptions about her intellectual limitations. Instead, something in her tone or body language triggered his analytical instincts in ways that would prove increasingly problematic for both of them. The program director's growing certainty that Clara represented some kind of security anomaly was about to drive him toward investigative measures that would threaten everything she had built to survive. "Wait until we're finished," Brennan instructed, his eyes remaining focused on Clara with the kind of assessment that suggested someone evaluating potential threats or opportunities. "And in the future, I think it would be appropriate for your cleaning activities in this area to be supervised by security personnel." The implication was clear. Clara's access to sensitive technical information was being restricted because Dr. Brennan had observed behavior that seemed inconsistent with her supposed capabilities and background. His systematic campaign to undermine her position was escalating toward measures that could expose her true identity through the kind of detailed investigation that might penetrate even the most carefully constructed cover story. As Clara left the conference room, she understood that her moment of analytical interest in Dr. Chun's equations had created a crisis that threatened both her personal safety and the success of a defense program whose failure could compromise American national security. The glimpse of her hidden expertise had been noticed by exactly the wrong person at the worst possible time, setting in motion events that would soon force her to choose between maintaining her anonymity and preventing a catastrophic failure that could cost lives and compromise the nation's defense capabilities. Dr. Brennan's suspicions about Clara crystallized into active hostility following the incident with Dr. Chin's equations, transforming what had been systematic oversight into a deliberate campaign designed to expose what he was convinced were dangerous deceptions about her background and capabilities. His conviction that Clara represented some form of security threat drove him to implement investigative measures that went far beyond normal personnel management, creating an environment of systematic harassment that tested every aspect of her carefully constructed cover identity. The escalation began with Brennan's decision to request a comprehensive security review of Clara's background, a process that required justification through documented evidence of suspicious behavior or potential security violations. His report to Titan Defense's security Department described a pattern of inappropriate interest in classified technical materials, citing her pause near Dr. Chun's equations as evidence of curiosity that exceeded normal custodial responsibilities. Subject: displays analytical awareness inconsistent with documented educational background, Brennan wrote in his formal security concern report. Observed behavior suggests possible intelligence training or technical knowledge that has not been disclosed through normal screening processes. Recommend immediate comprehensive background investigation and potential access revocation pending resolution of security concerns. The security review process subjected Clara to intensive questioning about every aspect of her documented history. Sessions conducted by professional investigators, whose training focused on identifying inconsistencies and deceptions in personal narratives. Clara found herself defending the fabricated details of her Romanian background while maintaining the psychological discipline necessary to avoid revealing any trace of her actual European aerospace engineering experience. Tell us about your education in Romania, the investigators would demand, reviewing documents that Clara knew were impeccable forgeries, but which might not survive the kind of detailed verification that Brennan's suspicions had triggered. What specific schools did you attend? Who were your teachers? Describe the curriculum and your academic performance in detail. The questions continued for hours across multiple sessions, probing for inconsistencies or gaps that might indicate deception, while Clara maintained the nervous uncertainty of someone whose limited education made such detailed inquiry uncomfortable and intimidating. Her responses required constant attention to maintaining consistency with her documented background while avoiding any revelation of the advanced technical training that had shaped her actual intellectual development. Brennan's campaign extended beyond formal security procedures to include daily harassment, designed to provoke reactions that might reveal her true capabilities or psychological training. He began conducting unannounced inspections of Clara's work areas, arriving at unpredictable times to observe her cleaning procedures while making comments clearly intended to test her knowledge and self-control. Careful with that radar-absorbing material sample, he would say when Clara was cleaning laboratory areas where prototype components were being tested. The electromagnetic properties of those composites represent breakthrough innovations in stealth technology. Of course, I don't expect someone with your background to understand the significance of quantum-level electromagnetic interactions. The comments were designed to seem like routine safety instructions, while actually functioning as intellectual provocations, intended to trigger defensive responses from someone whose actual expertise exceeded his own. Clara's ability to endure such condescension without reaction required the same emotional discipline that had once enabled her to maintain cover identities during classified intelligence operations. Yes, sir, I understand these materials are very delicate, Clara would reply, continuing her cleaning with the methodical efficiency that characterized her approach to all assigned tasks. I follow all the safety procedures for handling sensitive equipment. But Brennan's harassment campaign escalated beyond verbal provocations to include deliberate attempts to create situations where Clara's technical knowledge might be inadvertently revealed. He began leaving classified technical documents in areas where she worked, positioned in ways that would require her to handle them during normal cleaning procedures while he observed her reactions through concealed surveillance equipment. The documents contained information about electromagnetic stealth technology that Clara had helped pioneer during her European research, technical specifications, and theoretical frameworks that represented her own intellectual contributions to aerospace engineering. Handling these materials without revealing recognition of her own work required psychological control that tested the limits of her emotional discipline. Most challenging were Brennan's attempts to engage Clara in conversations about technical topics while presenting himself as someone generously sharing knowledge with an intellectually curious subordinate. These interactions were designed to seem like educational opportunities while actually functioning as sophisticated interrogation. Techniques intended to reveal inconsistencies between her supposed ignorance and her actual expertise. "You seem interested in our electromagnetic research," Brennan would say during his evening facility visits, approaching Clara while she cleaned around equipment that she understood better than most of the engineers who operated it. "Perhaps you'd like to understand how radar detection systems work. It's quite fascinating, though I'm afraid the mathematical concepts might be beyond your educational background." The patronizing tone was carefully calculated to provoke defensive responses from someone whose actual knowledge exceeded his own. But Clara had learned to accept such condescension with the patience of someone accustomed to being underestimated. Her responses maintained the appropriate mixture of gratitude and intellectual humility expected from support personnel who appreciated educational opportunities while understanding their limitations. "That's very kind of you, sir," Clara would reply, maintaining the deferential posture that reinforced Brennan's assumptions about her intellectual capabilities. "I'm always interested in learning, though I know these subjects are very complicated for someone with my limited education." The systematic nature of Brennan's harassment created an atmosphere where other facility personnel began to view Clara with suspicion and concern, understanding that association with someone under active security investigation could compromise their own careers and clearances. The collegial relationships she had developed with fellow custodial staff and facility workers deteriorated as people distanced themselves from someone who had attracted unwanted attention from senior management. Janet Morrison, Clara's supervisor, found herself caught between loyalty to a reliable employee and pressure from Brennan's office to document any unusual behavior or security concerns that might justify the increasingly intensive scrutiny. The weekly meetings that had once focused on work assignments and performance evaluations became interrogation sessions designed to identify evidence supporting Brennan's suspicions. "Dr. Brennan continues to express concerns about your work performance," Janet explained during one particularly uncomfortable meeting, her tone suggesting reluctance to participate in what she recognized as systematic harassment, but understanding that her own position required cooperation with senior management directives. "He wants detailed reports about your interactions with classified materials and any observations about your technical knowledge or curiosity." Clara's response demonstrated the kind of professional acceptance that was expected from employees who understood their vulnerable position while harboring no inappropriate resentments or ambitions. "I understand Dr. Brennan's concerns about security," she replied. "Please assure him that I take my responsibilities very seriously and only want to do my job properly." But privately, Clara was beginning to understand that Brennan's systematic campaign represented a threat that could no longer be managed through passive resistance and careful performance of her cover identity. His escalating harassment was creating conditions that would eventually force her to choose between maintaining her anonymity and protecting herself from accusations that could result in criminal prosecution or worse. The crisis that would shatter Clara's carefully maintained world began at 11:47 p.m. on November 3rd, when sophisticated cyber attackers penetrated Titan, Defense's most secure networks, and began systematically downloading the classified technical specifications for the B-47 Wraith stealth bomber program. The attack was detected by automated security systems within minutes, but the intruders had already accessed core databases containing electromagnetic signature data, material specifications, and flight control algorithms that represented 3 years of advanced military research. Clara was cleaning the main computer laboratory when emergency alarms began echoing throughout Building 7, their piercing electronic wails triggering lockdown protocols that sealed all exits and activated specialized security measures designed to contain potential espionage attempts. Emergency lighting bathed the facility in harsh red illumination, while automated systems began implementing damage assessment procedures that would determine the scope of the security. Breach. Dr. Brennan arrived at the facility within 20 minutes. His usually immaculate appearance disheveled from the urgency of responding to what appeared to be a catastrophic compromise of America's most critical aerospace technology. The cyber attack had penetrated systems that were supposed to be immune to foreign intelligence operations, accessing classified information that could enable enemy nations to develop countermeasures against the stealth bomber before it ever entered operational service. How much did they get? Brennan demanded as he burst into the emergency command center that had been established in the main conference room. His voice carried the kind of controlled panic that Clara recognized from her own experience with crisis management, the tone of someone understanding that careers and national security hung in the balance of decisions made in the next few hours. The initial damage assessment revealed that the attackers had focused specifically on the electromagnetic stealth technology that formed the core of the B-47's defensive capabilities. They had downloaded terabytes of data, including radar-absorbing material formulations, electromagnetic signature modeling software, and theoretical frameworks that could enable hostile nations to develop detection systems capable of neutralizing American stealth advantages. Clara's position in the computer laboratory provided her with a unique perspective on the fight unfolding crisis as security teams worked frantically to trace the attack vectors and assess the full extent of the data compromise. Her background in European aerospace intelligence operations enabled her to recognize the sophisticated techniques being employed by attackers, whose capabilities suggested state-level resources and planning. The cyber intrusion bore hallmarks of the same foreign intelligence operation that had compromised her own research years earlier in Europe, using identical penetration methods and targeting strategies that Clara remembered from the investigation that had destroyed her previous life. The attackers were employing advanced persistent threat techniques that suggested extensive preparation and intimate knowledge of American defense contracting security protocols. As Clara listened to the emergency response communications, she began to understand that the stolen electromagnetic data represented only the first phase of a broader operation designed to completely neutralize American stealth technology advantages. The attackers had specifically targeted Dr. Chun's radar signature research and the fundamental mathematical frameworks that enabled stealth aircraft to avoid detection by enemy radar systems. But Clara's analysis of the attack patterns revealed something that the frantic security teams had missed in their focus on immediate damage control. The cyber intrusion had been designed not just to steal existing technology, but to identify specific vulnerabilities in American stealth systems that could be exploited through targeted countermeasures. The attackers knew exactly what they were looking for, suggesting inside knowledge that went beyond normal intelligence gathering. The most disturbing aspect of Clara's assessment was her recognition that the stolen data contained the same fundamental mathematical errors that she had observed in Dr. Chun's work, flaws that would lead enemy analysts to develop countermeasures based on inaccurate understanding of American stealth capabilities. This created a unique opportunity to turn the espionage operation against itself, but only if someone with the appropriate expertise could guide the response. Clara stood frozen in the computer laboratory as the full implications of the crisis crystallized in her mind, torn between the anonymity that had protected her for 3 years and the knowledge that she alone possessed the expertise necessary to turn this catastrophic security breach into an opportunity to protect American military superiority. The stolen data contained mathematical errors that would mislead enemy analysts, but only if the response was managed by someone who understood both the theoretical frameworks involved and the sophisticated intelligence operation behind the attack. Her recognition of the attack patterns as identical to those used against her European research created a terrible irony. The same foreign intelligence operation that had destroyed her previous life was now threatening the American defense program she had been secretly protecting through her invisible service. The attackers had stolen data they believed would enable them to neutralize American stealth technology. But Clara understood that the flawed mathematical foundations would actually lead them toward countermeasures that would fail catastrophically. Temptation to reveal her expertise was overwhelming, driven by both patriotic duty and professional instincts that had been suppressed for 3 years. Clara could see exactly how to exploit the mathematical errors in the stolen data, turning the espionage operation into a sophisticated deception that would protect American stealth capabilities while misleading enemy defense development efforts. For decades, but intervention would require revealing knowledge that no night shift janitor could possibly possess. Expertise that would instantly destroy the carefully constructed identity that had kept her alive since fleeing Europe. Dr. Brennan's systematic harassment campaign had created an environment where any revelation of her true capabilities would be interpreted as evidence of espionage rather than hidden expertise working to protect American interests. The psychological conflict intensified as Clara listened to security teams discussing response strategies that she knew were fundamentally inadequate for the sophisticated threat they faced. Their focus on damage control and system security ignored the strategic opportunity presented by the attackers' theft of flawed data, missing a chance to turn defensive failure into offensive advantage. Clara's internal struggle was compounded by her understanding that time was running out for effective intervention. The stolen electromagnetic data would be analyzed by enemy scientists within days, and any opportunity to exploit their receipt of fundamentally flawed information would disappear once American authorities implemented obvious security measures that would alert the attackers to potential deception operations. The weight of decision pressed down on Clara as she realized that her choice would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the security of American military personnel who would depend on stealth technology for survival in future conflicts. The mathematical errors in the stolen data represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to protect American lives while maintaining technological superiority, but only if someone with her unique expertise could guide the response. As emergency lights continued to bathe the facility in harsh red illumination, and security teams worked frantically to contain a breach they didn't fully understand, Clara faced the most difficult decision of her life. She could maintain the anonymity that had protected her while allowing a catastrophic security failure to compromise American defense capabilities, or she could sacrifice everything she had built to survive in order to protect the nation that had unknowingly given her refuge. The choice would determine whether Clara Volkov remained a hidden guardian whose greatest contribution was invisible service, or whether Dr. Clara Volkova would emerge from 3 years of exile to save both a failing defense program and the stealth technology that kept America safe in an increasingly dangerous world. Clara's decision crystallized at 1:23 a.m. when she overheard Dr. Brennan's desperate phone call to Pentagon officials, his voice carrying the kind of controlled panic that she recognized from her own experience with impossible deadlines and national security crises. The cyber attack had compromised not just the B-47 Wraith program, but potentially the entire foundation of American stealth technology that had maintained air superiority for 3 decades. "We have to assume they got everything," Brennan was saying, his carefully maintained executive composure cracking under pressure that exceeded anything in his administrative experience. The electromagnetic signature data, the material specifications, the mathematical frameworks that enable our stealth capabilities. We're looking at a complete compromise of technologies that took 20 years and $50 billion to develop. The Pentagon officials on the speakerphone were demanding immediate damage assessment and recovery strategies, but Clara could hear in their questions the same fundamental misunderstanding of the crisis that was driving Brennan's inadequate response. They were treating this as a security breach requiring defensive measures, when it actually represented an opportunity for strategic deception that could protect American interests for decades. Standing in the computer laboratory where emergency Teams continued their frantic damage control efforts. Clara made the decision that would end 3 years of carefully maintained anonymity. The stolen data contained mathematical errors that would lead enemy analysts toward countermeasures based on fundamentally flawed understanding of stealth technology, but only if the American response was managed by someone who understood both the theoretical frameworks involved and the sophisticated intelligence operation behind the attack. Clara's approach to Dr. Brennan's emergency command center required her to abandon every protective instinct that had kept her alive since fleeing Europe. She walked through corridors where security personnel were implementing lockdown protocols, past emergency response teams whose urgent communications filled the air with technical jargon and procedural coordination. Her movement from invisible custodial worker to active participant in a national security crisis represented a transformation that could never be reversed. The emergency command center had been established in the main conference room where Clara had cleaned around classified technical discussions for 8 months, observing innovations and problems while maintaining the facade of someone who couldn't comprehend their significance. Now she approached the same space as Dr. Clara Volkova, one of Europe's most accomplished aerospace engineers, carrying knowledge that could revolutionize both the crisis response and the entire stealth bomber program. Dr. Brennan's reaction to Clara's entrance into the Security Emergency Command Center was immediate and hostile, his frustration with the unfolding crisis focusing on what appeared to be a custodial worker violating security protocols during the facility's most sensitive operational moment. His voice carried the kind of authoritative dismissal that had characterized their interactions for months, but now seemed absurdly misplaced given the expertise Clara was about to reveal. "Security!" Brennan shouted, his attention dividing between the emergency communications with Pentagon officials and what he perceived as an additional security breach requiring immediate correction. "Why is custodial staff in a classified emergency command center? Get her out of here immediately and document this as a serious security violation." Clara's response required her to abandon 3 years of careful deference and intellectual invisibility, transforming from the submissive night shift janitor who had endured systematic harassment into the brilliant scientist whose innovations had once been considered among Europe's most valuable defense contributions. Her voice carried the kind of calm authority that could only be developed through experience with genuine crisis management and life-or-death decision-making. "Dr. Brennan," Clara said, her accent shifting from the carefully maintained Eastern European uncertainty to the precise English she had spoken during international aerospace conferences. "The cyber attack you're responding to targeted electromagnetic stealth data containing fundamental mathematical errors that will mislead enemy analysts toward ineffective countermeasures. You have approximately 18 hours to exploit this opportunity before their scientists recognize the flaws and adjust their analysis." The transformation in Clara's bearing was so complete that several security personnel paused in their response to Brennan's orders, recognizing something in her posture and tone that suggested capabilities far beyond those of a night shift maintenance worker. Her presence in the emergency command center suddenly seemed less like a security violation and more like the arrival of someone whose expertise might be essential for managing the crisis. Brennan's reaction combined shock, confusion, and growing anger as he struggled to reconcile the submissive custodial worker he had been systematically harassing with someone who apparently possessed detailed knowledge of the classified technical issues dominating the emergency response. His voice carried disbelief tinged with the kind of outrage that suggested someone whose fundamental assumptions about organizational hierarchy and intellectual capability were being challenged. "What did you just say?" Brennan demanded, his attention shifting from the Pentagon communications to focus entirely on Clara, with the intensity of someone trying to process information that contradicted everything he believed about the situation. How could a janitor possibly know anything about electromagnetic stealth data or mathematical frameworks. Who are you? Clara's answer would shatter not only her carefully constructed cover identity, but also Dr. Brennan's confidence in his own leadership capabilities and understanding of the people working within his organization. The revelation that was about to unfold would transform the entire crisis response, while exposing the systematic harassment campaign as one of the most spectacular misjudgments in defense industry history. "My name is Dr. Clara Volkova," she replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty that had once characterized her most dangerous missions, critical technical presentations. "I pioneered the electromagnetic stealth technology that your program has been struggling to perfect. And I'm the only person in this facility who understands how to turn this apparent catastrophe into a strategic advantage that will protect American stealth capabilities for the next 20 years. The emergency command center fell into stunned silence as the implications of Clara's revelation began to register among the security personnel, emergency response teams, and Pentagon officials whose voices continued crackling through the speakerphone. Communications. Dr. Brennan's face cycled through expressions of disbelief, confusion, and dawning recognition as he struggled to process the transformation of someone he had systematically harassed into what appeared to be exactly the kind of expert whose assistance could determine whether the crisis would destroy or strengthen American defense capabilities. Clara's movement toward the main display screens required her to navigate past security personnel who were uncertain whether to detain her as an unauthorized intruder or defer to someone whose technical knowledge apparently exceeded that of anyone else present. Her familiarity with the emergency command center's layout and equipment reflected 8 months of invisible observation, but now she moved with the confident purposefulness of someone accustomed to directing complex technical operations under extreme pressure. The classified data displays showed real-time analysis of the cyber attack's scope and impact, revealing that the foreign intelligence operation had successfully penetrated multiple security layers to access the core mathematical frameworks underlying American stealth technology. Clara's examination of the stolen data confirmed her initial assessment. The attackers had obtained Dr. Chun's flawed electromagnetic calculations, along with supporting research that would lead enemy scientists toward fundamentally incorrect conclusions about stealth aircraft vulnerabilities. The mathematical errors in the stolen electromagnetic data represent a once-in-a-generation opportunity for strategic deception, Clara explained, her voice carrying the kind of technical authority that commanded immediate attention from everyone present. The attackers obtained calculations that appear to reveal stealth aircraft radar signatures, but the fundamental assumptions about electromagnetic wave interactions are incorrect in ways that will lead their countermeasure development toward approaches that will fail catastrophically. Her analysis of the attack patterns confirmed what she had suspected from the beginning. This was the same foreign intelligence operation that had compromised her European research years earlier, using identical penetration techniques and targeting strategies that suggested extensive preparation and intimate knowledge of Western defense research methodologies. The scope of their current operation indicated resources and planning that could only be supported by state-level intelligence organizations. Dr. Brennan's attempts to regain control of the situation reflected his growing understanding that Clara's claimed expertise might be legitimate, but his systematic harassment campaign had created a dynamic that made it impossible for him to simply accept her assistance without acknowledging the magnitude of his misjudgment. His voice carried defensive uncertainty as he struggled to maintain authority while recognizing his desperate need for exactly the kind of knowledge Clara claimed to possess. "Even if what you're saying is true," Brennan said, his tone suggesting someone trying to preserve credibility while acknowledging the potential value of assistance from an unexpected source, "we need verification of your background and credentials before classified information can be shared with someone whose identity and loyalties remain unconfirmed." Clara's response demonstrated both her understanding of security protocols and her recognition that time constraints made normal verification procedures impossible given the urgency of exploiting the deception opportunity before enemy analysts recognized the flawed data they had obtained. Her knowledge of the specific technical details involved in the crisis provided immediate evidence of expertise that would be impossible to fake. The electromagnetic signature calculations stolen by the attackers contain errors in the quantum level. Interaction modeling that will overestimate radar detectability by approximately 37%. Clara said, accessing technical specifications on the main display screens with the fluid expertise of someone completely familiar with the systems and data structures. This error will lead enemy countermeasure development toward radar frequencies and detection algorithms that will be unable to penetrate actual American stealth capabilities. Her manipulation of the classified data displays revealed intimate knowledge of both the theoretical frameworks and the specific implementation details that characterized the Nighthawk program's approach to electromagnetic stealth technology. Clara's familiarity with the mathematical models, material specifications, and testing protocols was so comprehensive that it provided undeniable evidence of expertise that exceeded anything possessed by other personnel present. The Pentagon officials participating through secure communications began asking technical questions that tested Clara's knowledge across multiple aspects of aerospace engineering and stealth technology development. Her responses demonstrated not only theoretical understanding, but practical experience with the kind of advanced research that had produced breakthrough innovations in electromagnetic signature reduction and radar-absorbing materials. Dr. Volkova, came a voice from Pentagon Communications that Clara recognized as belonging to a senior Defense Department official. Your technical analysis suggests familiarity with classified European aerospace research. Can you confirm your previous work with satellite stealth programs and explain how that experience relates to the current crisis? Clara's answer would complete her transformation from invisible custodial worker to acknowledged expert, while revealing the full scope of her background and the reasons for her 3-year exile from the scientific community. The explanation would also expose the sophisticated intelligence operation that had forced her into hiding while providing the context necessary for understanding how her unique expertise could turn the current crisis into a strategic advantage. I was the lead engineer for the European Space Agency's classified satellite stealth program until I discovered that my supervisor was selling breakthrough electromagnetic technology to hostile foreign governments. Clara replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone whose technical authority was beyond question. The same intelligence operation that destroyed my European career has now targeted American stealth research, but their theft of flawed mathematical data provides an opportunity to mislead their countermeasure development for decades. The revelation that the anonymous night shift janitor whom Dr. Brennan had been systematically harassing was actually one of Europe's most accomplished aerospace engineers created a moment of stunned recognition that would reshape everyone's understanding of hidden expertise, institutional assumptions, and the true sources of innovation in military technology development. Clara had emerged from 3 years of invisibility to save both a failing defense program and the stealth technology that protected American military personnel. But her intervention would also expose the cost of systematic harassment and the dangerous consequences of underestimating people whose true capabilities remained hidden beneath carefully constructed facades. 6 months after that transformative November night, Dr. Clara Volkova stood before a joint session of Congress, delivering testimony that would fundamentally reshape how America identified, protected, and utilized the hidden expertise that existed within its defense establishment. The woman who had once endured systematic harassment while invisibly safeguarding classified technology was now directing the most successful counterintelligence operation in recent Military history. The strategic deception that Clara had orchestrated had exceeded every expectation, turning what appeared to be a catastrophic security breach into a triumph that would protect American stealth capabilities for decades. The flawed mathematical data stolen by foreign intelligence services had led enemy scientists to develop countermeasures based on fundamentally incorrect assumptions about electromagnetic signature detection, resulting in defense systems that would fail spectacularly against actual American stealth aircraft. The mathematical errors in the compromised data have caused our adversaries to invest billions of dollars in radar technologies that cannot detect American stealth platforms. Clara testified, her voice carrying the calm authority that had once made her legendary among European aerospace engineers. Their countermeasure development programs will require complete restart once they recognize the deception, setting back their defensive capabilities by at least 15 years. Dr. Brennan's career had ended in disgrace within weeks of Clara's revelation, his systematic harassment campaign exposed as one of the most spectacular misjudgments in defense industry history. The Pentagon investigation had revealed that his targeting of Clara had been based entirely on his inability to recognize expertise that exceeded his own, culminating in the harassment of someone whose knowledge could have revolutionized his program from the beginning. The Nighthawk program had been transformed under Clara's technical leadership, with the corrected electromagnetic calculations enabling breakthrough improvements in stealth capabilities that exceeded original design specifications by significant margins. The B-47 Wraith had become not just a successful military aircraft, but a technological masterpiece that represented the pinnacle of aerospace engineering achievement. Clara's integration into the American defense establishment had required new protocols for protecting and utilizing personnel whose backgrounds made them valuable targets for foreign intelligence operations. The Volkova Protocol established comprehensive support systems for experts whose previous work in classified environments required careful management of their transition to new roles and responsibilities. The legal proceedings against the foreign intelligence network had resulted in the exposure of a sophisticated espionage operation that had compromised defense research in multiple countries over more than a decade. Clara's testimony had provided crucial evidence about methods and targets that enabled counterintelligence agencies to identify and neutralize threats that had remained hidden for years. Most significantly, Clara's case had inspired fundamental changes in how military organizations identified and developed talent, regardless of apparent background or conventional credentials. The assumption that intellectual capability was distributed according to educational achievement and professional status had been shattered by the revelation that one of the world's most accomplished aerospace engineers had been working as a night shift janitor. The mentorship program that Clara established for technical personnel who had been forced to abandon their careers due to security concerns or political persecution provided support for dozens of experts whose knowledge contributed to American defense capabilities. Her advocacy ensured that the next generation of hidden guardians would receive protection rather than harassment. Clara's personal transformation had been as dramatic as the institutional changes her case had inspired. The woman who had once endured casual dismissal and systematic undermining was now recognized as one of America's most valuable defense assets, someone whose expertise influenced policy decisions at the highest levels of government and military leadership. The apartment where Clara had once hidden artifacts of her true identity had been replaced by a home that reflected both her scientific achievements and her commitment to protecting the nation that had unknowingly given her refuge. The technical journals were no longer concealed among romance novels, and the photographs from her European research were displayed alongside recognition of her American contributions. The annual ceremony that honored Clara's service had become a powerful reminder of the hidden potential that existed within communities and organizations, inspiring others to recognize that true strength often existed in the most unexpected places. The award that bore her name was given to personnel who demonstrated exceptional courage in protecting classified capabilities while serving in roles that concealed their true expertise. As Clara concluded her congressional testimony about the ongoing success of the strategic deception operation, she reflected on the journey from invisible custodial worker to recognized expert whose innovations continued to protect American military personnel. The desk clerk who had been systematically harassed had become a symbol of hidden strength and the transformative power of recognizing true capability. Regardless of apparent position, the janitor's secret had indeed saved America and a $3 billion stealth bomber program, proving that the most dangerous weapons in the arsenal of democracy were not the aircraft themselves, but the dedication, brilliance, and hidden expertise of those who chose to serve their adopted nation in whatever role circumstances required. Dr. Clara Volkova had demonstrated that heroes come in many forms, and that the quiet strength of those who serve in shadows often represents the most powerful force for protecting the freedom and security that defines the American way of life. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.